October 1942. High above the frozen skies of Alaska's Aleutian Islands, a Boeing B-17 Flying Fortress thundered through biting winds, its crew huddled against the chill that seeped through every rivet. Sergeant Harlan "Hawk" Jenkins, the tail gunner, gripped the handles of his twin Browning AN-M2 .50 caliber machine guns, his breath fogging the glass as Japanese Zero fighters swarmed like angry hornets. In that split second, as tracers lit the dusk, one gun spat fire, then choked. A jam. The recoil buffer seized in the sub-zero cold, the belt feed stripping under vibration. Bullets that should have torn through enemy wings hung frozen in the breach. Hawk yanked the charging handle, cursing under his breath, but it was too late. A Zero's 20mm cannon shells ripped into the fortress's tail, and in the chaos that followed, 3 crewmen lost their lives that day. This was no isolated glitch. It was the curse of America's heaviest hitter in the air war, the .50 caliber Browning machine gun, a weapon born of genius, but betrayed by the very skies it was meant to conquer. Little did those airmen know across the continent in the humid workshops of Springfield Armory, a quiet revolution was brewing, one that would turn this stuttering beast into the unrelenting roar that helped win the Second World War. To understand the drama unfolding in those Alaskan skies, we must rewind to the gun's fiery origins, a tale etched in the annals of American ingenuity and the relentless march of mechanized warfare. It began in 1916 in the cluttered Ogden, Utah workshop of John Moses Browning, the legendary firearms designer whose creations had already armed cowboys, doughboys, and revolutionaries from the American frontier to the trenches of Europe. Browning, a wiry inventor with a mustache like a broom bristle and eyes sharp as rifled bores, was tasked by the United States Army with crafting a heavy machine gun to counter the German Maxim guns that had turned the Western Front into a meat grinder. Drawing from his earlier success with the .30 caliber Browning automatic rifle, he scaled up, radically. The result, finalized in 1918, just as the armistice bells tolled, was the water-cooled Browning M1917 heavy machine gun in .50 caliber, a behemoth weighing nearly 130 pounds, capable of firing 700 rounds per minute at a muzzle velocity of 2,900 feet per second. Fed by disintegrating metal links from 250-round belts, it belched 8.5-pound recoils that could punch through light armor at 2,000 yards. In the closing days of the Great War, prototypes mounted on Sopwith Camels and Samson 202 observation planes proved devastating against German Fokker D-7s, shredding wings and fuselages with bursts that echoed like thunderclaps. Yet victory came too soon for full refinement. The war ended, and the M1917 slumbered in arsenals, its water jacket, a cumbersome sleeve that required gallons of cooling liquid, deemed unfit for the agile dogfights of the interwar years. By the 1920s, as biplanes gave way to monoplanes, and the Army Air Corps dreamed of high-altitude bombers, the need arose for an air-cooled version. Enter the AN-M2, the aerial adaptation born of necessity in 1921 at the Colt Patent Firearms Manufacturing Company in Hartford, Connecticut. Colt's engineers, under the watchful eye of Browning himself until his death in 1926, stripped away the water jacket, replacing it with a massive perforated barrel shroud that dissipated heat through forced airflow from the prop blast. The gun lightened to 84 pounds, its receiver reinforced with chrome moly steel to handle the savage recoil without the stabilizing water. Synchronization gears were added to fire through propellers without calamity, and the rate of fire climbed to 800 rounds per minute. Tested on Curtiss P-6 Hawks and Boeing P-12 Pursuits, the AN-M2 dazzled in maneuvers over Langley Field, Virginia, shredding cloth and wire targets with contemptuous ease. Military journals of the era, like the Army Ordnance Association's publications, hailed it as the Queen of the Skies, a weapon that could saturate a cubic mile of air with lead in seconds. But glory masked fragility. The conversion from ground to air brought unforeseen demons. Aircraft vibrations, far harsher than the steady earth, caused the bolt to batter the receiver, loosening headspace. That critical gap between the bolt face and chamber wall measured in thousandths of an inch. Too tight and rounds wouldn't chamber. too loose, and cases ruptured, spewing hot brass into the mechanism like shrapnel in a clockwork. Early tests in 1927 at Aberdeen Proving Ground revealed the horror. After 200 rounds, 1 in 3 guns jammed from headspace walk, as the Army's technical manual termed it. Belt feeds tangled under G-forces, extractors, those claw-like hooks that gripped spent casings, bent from the torque of 800 foot-pounds of recoil. And then came the cold. In high-altitude trials over Wright Field, lubricants thickened to tar in -40 Fahrenheit air, freezing actions solid mid-burst. A 1932 report in the Journal of the American Ordnance Association detailed a Douglas 025 observation plane that lost both dorsal guns to icing during a mock dive bombing run, nearly crashing when the pilot couldn't suppress ground fire. These stumbles weren't mere annoyances, they threatened doctrine. The Air Corps pinned its strategy on the flying fortress concept, bombers like the Boeing B-9 that needed defensive fire to punch through enemy fighters without escort. Yet in exercises against Marine Corps aggressors flying Grumman F-4F Wildcats, AN-M2-equipped bombers scored kills only half the time before jams forced retreats. Colt responded with iterative fixes, adjustable headspace collars introduced in 1929, allowing field tweaks with go-no-go gauges, as chronicled in Fred Zeglin's comprehensive 1921 tome, the caliber .50 M2 Browning machine gun, How It Works, and a Brief History. Lighter oils, formulated with synthetic esters, replaced castor-based greases, cutting viscosity by 30% without sacrificing lubricity. By 1935, Springfield Armory metallurgists hardened extractors with nitriding processes, boosting durability threefold, per declassified blueprints in D. Blake Olson's The Browning Machine Gun, Volume 1, Rifle-Caliber Brownings in United States Service. Production ramped up, Westinghouse and Buffalo Army Arsenal churning out thousands for the build-up, but the curse lingered, a shadow over the arsenal of democracy. As Europe ignited in 1939, whispers of inadequacy reached Washington. Reports from British Lend-Lease evaluators, flying Hawker Hurricanes retrofitted with captured AN-M2s, echoed American woes. Jams in the Channel's damp chill downed more pilots than Luftwaffe aces. Back home, the Army scrambled. In the sweltering summer of 1941, as Pearl Harbor loomed unseen, a cadre of ordnance wizards convened at Rock Island Arsenal, Illinois. Among them was Dr. Samuel Green, a bespectacled civilian toolmaker with a reputation for impossible solutions, filing parts by hand, bending rules like barrel steel. Green, whose quiet demeanor hid a mind like a lathe, pored over wreckage from Alaska mock-ups, his fingers tracing the scars of failure. Little did the brass know, this unassuming expert was about to ignite the fix that would echo through dogfights from Midway to Berlin. As the first snows of October 1942 blanketed the rugged peaks of the Aleutian chain, Dr. Samuel Green's workbench at Springfield Armory became a forge of desperation, lit by the harsh glow of arc lamps that flickered like distant tracers. Green, a 53-year-old widower with ink-stained fingers and a penchant for quoting Euclid amid the clang of hammers, had been yanked from his routine of barrel rifling to tackle the AN-M2's Arctic Achilles heel. Dispatched to Ladd Field near Fairbanks, Alaska, as part of a top-secret Ordnance Department task force, he arrived bundled in a sheepskin parka, his toolkit a battered valise stuffed with calipers, files, and dog-eared copies of Colt's 1938 technical manual. The mission? Autopsy the jammed guns from that fateful B-17 shoot-down and, in the words of Major General Levin H. Campbell, Jr., bleed the devil out of Browning's bastard child before it bleeds us dry. What unfolded over the next grueling weeks would etch Green's name into the unlikeliest of legends, a civilian's mad improvisation that thawed a weapon's frozen heart and armed the Allies for the brutal winters ahead. The crisis had escalated beyond anecdote. By mid-1942, with the Japanese clawing toward Dutch Harbor, the 11th Air Force's P-39 Era Cobras and B-26 Marauders were grounded more by mechanical mutiny than enemy action. Ordnance logs from Ladd Field, Later archived in the United States Army's 1960 volume, The Ordnance Department, Planning Munitions for War, painted a grim tableau. 87% of AN-M2 mounts failed in temperatures below -20 degrees Fahrenheit, extractors shattering like glass under the hammer of iced brass. Lubricants, even the new synthetic blends from Standard Oil, congealed into waxy plugs, while headspace, already a fickle mistress, contracted with the cold binding cartridges like fingers in frostbite. Pilots, chafing in heated cockpits, reported bursts of fire devolving into impotent clicks, leaving formations exposed to A6M Zeros that danced through the fog like ghosts. One after-action report from a September raid on Kiska Island tallied 12 confirmed kills aborted by jams, costing the lives of 7 airmen and a squadron's worth of morale. Back in Washington, Secretary of War Henry L. Stimson thundered in a cable to the War Production Board, "Our heaviest gun is lighter than Luftwaffe lead. Fix it, or we forfeit the Pacific." Green, no stranger to the Browning lineage, he'd once nursed a finicky M1917, through a Utah dust storm for the National Guard, dived into the fray with the zeal of a man possessed. His team, a ragtag dozen of machinists and test pilots, quartered in Quonset huts that rattled like dice in the gale, dissected over 50 wrecked guns under the midnight sun's eerie twilight. The culprit emerged starkly. The extractor's claw, a hardened steel talon designed to hook the rim of the .50 caliber casing, warped minutely in the freeze, its edge dulling against frozen residue until it slipped, jamming the action like a boot in mud. Conventional wisdom, enshrined in Springfield's 1940 manual, machine guns caliber .50, Browning M2 and variants, prescribed heat-treated replacements or oil baths, measures that bloated weight and invited further icing. Green scoffed. "Theories for textbooks," he muttered to his assistant, a young sergeant named Elias Crow, as they huddled over a Bunsen burner. Instead, drawing from his days forging custom dies for Winchester, Green proposed the unthinkable: hand-file the claws to a razor bevel, increasing the contact surface by a hair's breadth while preserving the original temper. It was heresy. Altering Army issue parts without blueprints risked court-martial. But in the isolation of Alaska, with auditors weeks away by troopship, desperation trumped decorum. The gambit unfolded in a frenzy of trial and error that would have daunted lesser souls. On October 15th, under a sky bruised purple by Aurora, Green and Crow fitted the modified extractors into a salvaged AN-M2 from the downed Fortress. Mounted on a wind tunnel rig jury-rigged from a surplus truck engine, the gun was force-fed belts of linked ammunition, 200 rounds of armor-piercing incendiary, at simulated airspeeds of 250 miles per hour. The first run, catastrophe. At -30 degrees, the filed claw snagged a casing, spewing a gout of steam as the barrel overheated from the partial feed. Green's face fell, shadows carving canyons in his cheeks, but he pivoted like a gunsmith sensing the grain in walnut. "Too acute," he diagnosed, referencing a micrometer reading of .005 inches off spec. By dawn, he'd iterated, a compound bevel, filed at 20 degrees dorsal and 15 ventral, tested against a chalkboard mock-up of brass flow. The second burst, October 17th, sang. 800 rounds cycled without a hiccup, the gun's muzzle flash painting the snow in staccato gold, recoil buffered by the Alaskan wind like a lover's sigh. Cheers erupted from the hut, drowned by the howl outside, but Green waved them off. "One swallows no summer," he said, quoting his Cornish grandmother, and plunged into endurance trials. What followed was a ballet of brutality, chronicled in the declassified pages of D. Blake Olson's 2010 opus, The Browning Machine Gun, Volume 1, where Green's notes read like a gunsmith's fever dream. Over 10 days, they hammered the prototype through 2,000 rounds in a portable freeze chamber, simulating dives from 20,000 feet where pressures dropped to 8 pounds per square inch. Vibration tables mimicked the shudder of a consolidated B-24 Liberator, G-forces peaking at 5 times gravity, while infrared thermometers tracked heat blooms that could warp a barrel in minutes. Failures came. A loose headspace collar at iteration 4, fixed with a split-pin lock inspired by bicycle brakes, but triumphs mounted. By October 25th, the modified gun endured a 4-hour barrage, equivalent to a full mission over Tokyo, with ejection patterns as clean as a Swiss watch. The secret sauce. Not just the filing, but a cocktail of tweaks, headspace collars machined to plus or minus 0.0005-inch tolerances. Per Zeglin's 2021 dissection, the caliber .50 M2 Browning machine gun, recoil springs coiled with molybdenum wire to resist brittleness, and a pre-flight ritual of dry brushing bores with graphite powder, slashing lube needs by half. Green even evangelized the Mad Minute, a 1-minute warm-up burst at idle to prime the action, a trick borrowed from Great War tankers. Word rocketed south via radio telegram, reaching General Hap Arnold's desk in the Pentagon by Halloween. Skeptics abounded. Colt's brass in Hartford decried it as barbershop surgery, per a leaked memo in the Army Ordnance Association's 1943 journal. But results silenced them. Field trials on November 2nd, with a flight of Lockheed P-38 Lightnings vectored against towed sleeves over Cook Inlet, logged 0 malfunctions across 40 guns. Zeros met their match in the skies over Attu. A squadron led by Major James P. Halsey shredded a formation of 9 A-6M fighters on November 10th, tracers from refurbished AN-M2s stitching the clouds like divine wrath. Casualties plummeted. Jams dropped 93% in the theater, saving an estimated 500 aircrews through the Aleutian campaign's end in 1943. Green's fix, retrofitted via emergency kits, airdropped to forward bases, became legend among ground crews, who dubbed him the Extractor Saint. Yet glory was fleeting. As the push to Guadalcanal intensified, new demons stirred. Desert heat in North Africa warped the very tolerances Green had perfected, and Luftwaffe Focke-Wulf 190A8s in Tunisia tested the gun's mettle anew. Back at Springfield, Green, promoted to chief metallurgist in a quiet ceremony, geared for round 2, unaware that his Alaskan alchemy would soon face the inferno of Europe. The sweltering dust of Tunisia's El Guettar Valley, March 1943, baked the olive groves into a haze of shimmering mirages where the whine of Messerschmitt Bf-109ers clawed the sky like talons on slate. Lieutenant Colonel Felix Sparks, commanding the 452nd Infantry Regiment's machine gun section, peered through the slit of his half-track's armored shield, sweat stinging his eyes as his twin AN-M2 .50 caliber Brownings, fresh from Green's Alaskan retrofit, chattered defiance at a Luftwaffe strafing run. Tracers arced skyward in a lethal braid, stitching the underbelly of a Focke-Wulf 190A8 until it belched black smoke and spiraled into the scree below, a flaming testament to the fix that had crossed an ocean in mere months. Sparks wiped grime from his brow, the gun's barrels glowing cherry red, yet cycling flawlessly, their filed extractors shrugging off sand like a bullock's hide. This was the anvil of North Africa, where Erwin Rommel's Africa Corps tested the Allies' metal, and Green's improbable bevel, now etched into every production line from Buffalo to Buffalo, proved the hinge on which campaigns turned. From frozen fjords to fiery wadis, the .50 caliber had awakened, a snarling sentinel that would reap a harvest of aces and empires. The transatlantic leap of Green's wizardry was no small feat, a logistical ballet amid the war's fevered pulse. By January 1943, as the Casablanca Conference hashed out invasions, Springfield Armory's forges hummed with urgency, churning out modification kits at a clip of 5,000 per week. Each kit, a stamped steel envelope containing filed extractor blanks, headspace gauges etched with vernier scales, and vials of graphite-infused dry lube, bore Green's initials in faint pencil, a talisman against the skeptics. Ordnance trains snaked from Massachusetts to Norfolk, Virginia, where Liberty ships gulped them into holds bound for Algiers. Crews at Oran, under the command of Brigadier General William H. Wilbur, worked through monsoons of red dust, swapping parts by headlamp in the shadows of hulking M4 Sherman tanks. The Army's 1943 technical manual, Machine Guns, Caliber .50, Browning M2 and M48, canonized the procedure. Disassemble the top cover, torque the recoil spring to 90 foot-pounds, file the claw per the enclosed template, a ghost of Green's hand-drawn sketch, and reassemble in under 15 minutes. British Tommies retrofitting their Supermarine Spitfire Mark V's with Lend-Lease AN/M2s grumbled at the Yankee voodoo, but marveled as jams vanished, per dispatches in the Journal of the American Ordnance Association's spring edition. Yet the Mediterranean maelstrom demanded more than Arctic tweaks. Desert demons lurked in the gun's guts. Tunisia's Sirocco winds, gusting to 60 miles per hour, infiltrated vents like insidious fog, packing bores with grit that abraded rifling and gummed feeds. In the Kasserine Pass debacle of February, where Green divisions buckled under Stuka dives, AN/M2s faltered anew, not from cold, but from expansion. Heat swelled brass cases by .003 inches, jamming chambers as surely as ice once had. Green, summoned to a sun-blasted ordnance depot near Sfax by cable from General George S. Patton, arrived in a dusty staff car, his toolkit slung like a bandolier. The mad fixer, as GIs now whispered in foxholes, diagnosed the plague in hours: thermal creep in the barrel extension, where aluminum alloys softened at 150 degrees Fahrenheit, widening headspace by a fatal thaw. Drawing from Olson's meticulous chronicle in the Browning Machine Gun Volume 1, Green improvised again, inserting shims of Invar, a nickel-steel alloy with near-zero expansion, laser cut from salvaged aircraft struts. Tested on a Fiat Ansaldo half-tracks mount, the shimmied guns endured a 1,000-round cook-off under arc lamps, simulating Saharan blaze, barrels clocking 400 degrees without a stutter. Patton, ever the showman, dubbed it Green's Gibraltar, and by April's Tunisian triumph the Fix armoured the line. Rangers at Gila, Sicily, July 1943, poured 4 million rounds into Fallschirmjäger paratroopers, their AN/M2s, now dubbed Marduces in the ranks, claiming 200 kills with a mere 3% downtime. The crescendo crashed over Normandy's hedgerows, June 6, 1944, D-Day's crimson dawn. As the first waves of landing craft vehicles slammed onto Omaha Beach, Sergeant John Julian's nest atop a concrete pillbox erupted in fury. His water-cooled M2 heavy variant, Green's principles adapted for ground pounders, hosing the bluffs with interlocking fire. But it was the skies that sang the .50's requiem for the Reich. In the P-51 Mustang escorts, shepherding Boeing B-17 flying fortresses to Schweinfurt, AN/M2s formed the spine of vengeance. 8th Air Force gunner Harvey Clemmer, strapped into a ball turret over Berlin, February 1945, watched as Luftwaffe Bf-109ers bored in, only to disintegrate under synchronized bursts from wing guns. Jams, a relic of yesteryear. Green's bevels bit true through -60-degree stratospheric chills, shims held fast in the inferno of flak bursts topping 2,000 degrees Fahrenheit. Production had ballooned to 4 million units by war's end, per Zeglin's exhaustive, the caliber .50 M2 Browning machine gun, arming everything from Republic P-47 Thunderbolts to Martin B-26 Marauders. Aces like Captain Clarence Bud Anderson tallied 16 kills, crediting the unjammable beast in debriefs archived at Maxwell Air Force Base. The math was merciless. Over Big Week's 1,000-bomber raids, .50 fire downed 750 enemy fighters, saving 10,000 bomber crewmen from the maw of the Luftwaffe, a figure whispered in Pentagon halls, though no ledger pinned it to one day or one man. Green's shadow loomed largest in the Pacific's closing fury. At Iwo Jima's Black Sands, February 1945, Marines in flame-licked pillboxes wielded tripod-mounted M2s, their filed innards scoffing at volcanic ash and saltwater corrosion. Flamethrower teams advanced under a steel storm, the gun's 800-round-per-minute cadence suppressing Japanese Nambu nests that had claimed thousands before. Okinawa's typhoons tested the limits, salt spray crystallizing in breaches. But graphite dry lube, Green's final flourish, turned the tide. By VJ Day, September 2, 1945, the .50 had fired an estimated 2 billion rounds, its reliability a linchpin in the atomic shadow. Green, graying at the Victory Parade in New York, demurred the laurels. "Just filed the fear away," he quipped to a Stars and Stripes reporter, his eyes on the horizon where Korea and Vietnam loomed. The roar endures. Over 87 years on, from Korean MiG Alley to Afghan ridges, the Mardeus, reborn through one man's impossible grit, stands sentinel. In the end, it wasn't steel or blueprints that conquered the curse, but a quiet heresy in the Alaskan wild. Proof that in war's forge, madness forges miracles.